you achieve a sustainable solutions for sustainable development. And in order to do that, then we look at 5 pillars of work. Small-scale innovative technologies are enabler in a way that when you take them, obviously I think we had a discussion what we call a small-scale, obviously in terms of definition. But when you take them, obviously you need to take them from also a cross-sectorial approach. Then you need to find the solutions, not just electricity access, but how to address water, energy, food nexus. This is extremely important, and then you need to select the solutions that can help in this respect. And number 2, the pillar of work was the capacity building. What we mean by capacity building is not just about electricity. When you implement any kind of project, be it energy and others, you need to empower the community. Number 1, to ensure sustainability, then you need to ensure whatever system you implement, its maintenance, and it's already taken care by the community, by those who help them from a technical aspect. But another aspect that we did through Regent, it's not just about the renewable energy technologies. It's also about the system of irrigation that you have it. It's about also the food, good agricultural practices, because it's a whole value chain. If you implement a project and you keep using the same quantity and volume of electricity, you didn't solve the problem. You need to ensure that the water, energy, food nexus principles are very well embedded. And this is what we did by implementing these solutions. So that's why the capacity building were integrated in a way with our partners. We ensured that we teach them in terms of renewable energy, water, energy, food nexus, good agricultural practices, and even to improve their economic activity, because most of the time they need to teach them the communication strategies, more importantly the tools of marketing. We went beyond just that and to have them access to the market. And the other aspect which was extremely important is the entrepreneurship. Small-scale innovative technologies, when taken from an integrated approach, open up the possibility also, be it for youth and women and cooperatives, to empower them in a way that not only they expand, upscale the solution that you do for them, but also it helps them also to generate new revenues, and these revenues can help them to invest in other activities. So this was extremely important. And the other aspects beyond the technology, the capacity building and the empowerment was the policy aspect. At the end of the day, it's about policies and regulations. And it's there where all of us, it's not just the policy makers, all the different stakeholders have a role to play in order to make that the policies and regulations, when they are designed, they are implementable, and we're at the same time sustainable, and there is a reporting to improve them. Provided that, so we did the policy toolkit, we did a lot of stakeholder engagement at different levels of policy level in order to engage with the financial institutions, but also with the private sector in order to improve the local policies. But more importantly, also it was not just a policy of energy to promote small scale, but also to speak with the water sector, the agricultural sector. This was important. The other aspect I did, as I did mention, is about the gender. This was key because we identified when we speak about this kind of solutions, and we had experiences where when we spoke to women, we found them really eager to learn about small-scale innovative technologies. So basically, besides the capacity building, we had to focus how to engender the whole activities, and this is where we did basically, whether in the capacity building, when we implemented the project, in order to ensure they really support the empowerment of women, increasing their revenues, and also to help them to improve their quality of life. And obviously, when you say about improving the quality of life for women, then for her kids, and then her family and the community. But beside all of that, so this was a regional initiative that we implemented in the Mashriq, in Lebanon, in Jordan, and Tunisia. And then we expanded up to Algeria and Mauritania. And just to indicate with Islamic development by our support, but also the Swedish government, this just to indicate that as a regional initiative, what we are saying that integrated approach of a business model built on the small scale and innovative technologies really helps to address the last mile, and more importantly helps to ensure that this integrated business model are sustainable in a way that they address multi-stakeholder problems that are related to the different sectors, environmental, economic and social, and obviously addressing the climate and ensuring that we build really a resilience to these communities. Thank you.
Before we move on to another topic, I just wondered if anybody in the audience has other case studies that we should make sure we don't miss out on in finalizing the report. Does anybody have any further case studies we should be aware of? If not, just make sure if it comes to mind afterwards, please do make sure that we are aware of them and take them into account. I'll move on to another topic. If I can ask Dr. Mahmood, given that many of the Middle East countries have economies heavily linked to the fossil fuels, do you think it's feasible or easy for them to shift away from fossil fuels? And what strategies do you think would be most effective?
Thank you for the question. And indeed, that is the shift is difficult, but it is a must. The transition toward green economy in general, but especially renewable energy, is a must for the MENA region, especially those who are really dependent on oil and gas. Because if we would like to maintain MENA leadership on the energy sector, we need to diversify. We need to make sure that we are serving the new needs of the energy community. And it is coming. The snowball has started already. So whether we stop there and say, no, oil and gas is enough, or we diversify and then we reap the benefit early and maintain our leadership. So it's a matter of positioning first. It's a matter of policy of diversification of the economy. It's a matter of reaping the benefits also of the huge opportunities that are coming not only from the potential that we have, the resources, wind, solar, etc., but also from the possibilities that are offered to our community to develop. And especially when we touch a small-scale issue, I think all of you have highlighted, and the presentation, I congratulate you on the presentation, it was excellent. You have highlighted that many countries have targets, and 80% of the targets are only on the hand of few countries. Egypt was among of them, and I'm Egyptian, although RICRI is an intergovernmental body serving 17 Arab countries. So when you look into the targets, you will find them mostly focusing on large-scale, utility-scale projects. And the examples, for example, in Egypt, you'll find Ben Bank complex, you'll find huge wind project on the Gulf of Suez area, and many other projects. When you go to Morocco, you'll find a similar case. When you go to the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, huge giga-scale projects. Emirate, even Jordan, etc. And then when you look into the depth of these targets, you ask the country, what you are building your target on a pipeline of projects. And this pipeline of projects is okay. They have, for large scale, certain steps well acknowledged. Allocation of land, zoning, exercise, infrastructure, grid expansion, etc. But when you ask them what is the role of small scale, few of the countries have quantified targets for small scale renewables. This is the reality, that you cannot see a concrete target that is announced in the national action plans for renewable energy. You'll find this target global and mostly addressing large scale projects. And this is where the intervention of organizations like RICRI, like ICESCO and Islamic Development Bank, etc. It is important that we help the country to rightly shape their national action plans, to ensure that they integrate the aspects of small-scale, renewable, and decentralized solutions, also energy efficiency as part of this, into their planning for sustainable energy transition. And while doing that, you will be surprised by a number of issues. You'll find that, first of all, there are plenty of policies that are written in codes and regulations. For example, net metering policy. For example, self-consumption, promotion. But when you go into the practice, you'll find many barriers against this. And it's a role of us also to support how to bridge these gaps, how to understand better how to design better guidelines, how to do it. When you go for net metering, or when you go for self-consumption model, or when you go for integrator concepts as a business model, as Radia highlighted for rural areas, when you go into a country that has been suffering from the war like Iraq or Syria or Yemen or Libya, think about MENA in this perspective, and then you see that we have an opportunity for a green recovery. Not only just, and this green recovery should be inclusive. And those who have suffered should not wait for the infrastructure to be built. So you can go with transitional phases, and you can go with, I would say, innovative solutions that you build, for example, new micro and small grids that are sustainable, that are based on renewable solutions that can be integrated later into the national grids, and so on. We have plenty of options. The most important issue is how to de-risk the investment in this. And de-risking investment is a wide word, a concept that we are always discussing. But for small-scale applications, it is totally different. Why? Because we have what we call a fragmented nature, which is not typically attractive for the banking sector. The ticket size is the same when you go for 1 million project and 1,000. The process is somehow similar. So they are not that much interested unless you introduce the concept of green finance to the banking sector, sustainable finance, work with the central banks, and this is what we do. This is what we do as RCRE also now, working with the central banks in different countries to design sustainability programs for the bank that ensure their own operation, their own lending practices are considering green solutions, so renewable energy and energy efficiency, decentralized for a small scale. Also, going into the implementation level, enhancing the implementation capacities of the country. And here we speak about also the banking sector when we speak about finance today. They need to develop a taxonomy that consider the risk matrix for small scale in a different way than they consider other projects. This is a totally different bundle of actions there. And the approach is different. And we need to couple this project with a strong component of technical assistance, similar to Region project. And a similar project we have conducted in Syria also for women empowerment, and developed small businesses for solar energy in a portfolio of villages there. So when you discuss the details, you'll find that you need to go into certain measures and actions with different stakeholders. You need to go for the agri-food sector with the approach that fit the agri-food sector. For example, how they pay the lending terms, how they pay for the debts they have, the commercial loans. They pay based on the agriculture cycle, not monthly or quarterly. This is better for them. Who would represent them? The cooperatives that can represent them, not the typical lending. The collaterals issue for small scale is a strong issue. So how you overcome this? There are plenty of solutions. So what I'm saying, there are macro policies, there are nationwide, there are regional policies for sure that for harmonizing the standards, for having aligned the action for a shared goal all over the region. And this is what we do through the Pan-Arab strategy for sustainable energy. But also there are measures that goes into the local level, into the city level, how you interact on the city level, and so on. You can think also, for example, we are starting an initiative now with the Port Management Association for East Africa on green ports. And you can imagine the potential in all coastal cities for this. And how would you couple this with, for example, the transition to green hydrogen? There are plenty of options. The concept for small scale is very wide. B2X in industrial aspects. In the industry, there are several approaches. For example, platforms for green finance, online tools, guiding. So you need to work at different levels with different measures. The most important to have a good, coherent ecosystem, policy framework that would allow for the growth on the small-scale decentralized solutions and enhancing the implementation capacity, the execution level on the ground with the member states that we are working on. Thank you. Thank
you very much. There's a lot of food for thought there. I very much agree that energy efficiency is really key alongside renewable energy, and I think you're very right to draw our attention to the potential that exists because of the solar irradiation, obviously, but also the space that there is for renewables. And you're right about the unique solutions that are needed for small scale as opposed to utility scale. I think that's all very true. If I can change the subject slightly, and Dr. Mastrojani, how does the Union for the Mediterranean facilitate renewable energy projects across Mediterranean countries?
Thank you. We have a whole plan for decarbonizing the region, well, it's evaluated a 76 trillion euros plan. Most of it is very far away from small scale. It relies very much on integrating the energy system markets and grids, basically to allow tapping in the huge solar potential of the south and giving it at the same time an outcome market that will provide enough finance to develop it. But I came here thinking of small scale. So let me introduce a notion that was already hinted by my colleagues, and I'm happy that Mahmoud spoke before me, because basically we cooperate, and in that area we are hand in hand, just as much as I'm happy I was preceded by ICESCO, because some of those things were hinted. When I came here, I said, what can I say about the Mediterranean? Because in a uniform approach, the economics of small local renewables are the same. How you use them is more determined by market, political, and societal considerations. But there is one thing that is emerging which has a value that goes way beyond the few watts that we save. That is, local renewable is also one part of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency is doing more with less, but it is also tapping directly into renewable energy without mediating it with electricity or fuel. Is when you directly use the wind, is when you directly use the waves, this kind of things. So the present situation is that in 10-15 years' time, the south part of Europe will have a climate that we don't know how to handle, but that our friends down south have managed during thousands and thousands of years. Out of that experience came out some ways which were a little bit laughed upon. They called it traditional knowledge, but nothing prevents traditional knowledge into being updated. If you go along the Silk Road, you easily find those cone-shaped buildings called yakchal, which in Persian means a fridge that the merchants use to deposit perishable goods. No matter how hot it is outside, inside it's always between 0 and -4. Of course, we cannot build any more stone buildings that last 2,000 years, but still there is a technology there. One huge question mark about the energy challenge in our plans, we placed 40% of the decarbonization challenge on energy efficiency, is, for instance, cooling. Cooling is one demonstration of a larger dynamic. That is that the fact that some parameters of the ecosystem are not in balance anymore do not only unbalance other parameters of the ecosystem, but also induce irrational destructive behaviors in mankind. The more it's hot, the more I use air conditioning, the more I emit, the more it's going to be hot, and it's going to be a huge feedback loop. But when I think about the possibility to enhance, actualize wind towers, yakchals, and I could go on with a list, and it's not only there, it's in agriculture, it's in harvesting the moisture of the night in the qanats and things like that. there is indeed a huge potential, and this potential starts to be a little bit political. And now in the scope, you will allow me to be frank and probably politically incorrect. Now it's not so much on the screen, but there used to be a chapter called Technology Transfer that was tense. And it was tense why? And let us be frank, it was tense because technology transfer was conceived as the generous gift of the beautiful, advanced, and marvelous to those who are not. But what is technology? Technology is know-how, and sometimes the concrete know-how is not only the last computer. So, based on this, I mean, us in Europe, we will need the wisdom of the Kanat, not vice versa. In our area, we're starting to overcome a little bit this idea of technology transfer, and we are getting into knowledge sharing. The whole system we are proposing to overcome climate change in our terribly exposed zone is I need you, you need me. I know this goes a little bit far from the finance of microgrids, but still I believe it is a component that needs to be seriously considered.
Thank you very much. I think there's some food for thought there about what might follow on in terms of looking at energy efficiency alongside renewable energy. If I can turn to Dr. Sobi now, what financial models has the Islamic Development Bank found most effective in supporting small-scale renewables? Because obviously small-scale is harder than big-scale in many ways.
Thank you, Professor. You're absolutely right. It's a high transaction cost, as Dr. Magid said, high effort, not as big as an outcome. But just let me start by thanking ICESCO for inviting Islamic Development Bank to this panel. I feel like I'm in between giants of the energy sector. My name is Amr Sobhi. I'm from the climate change team at the Islamic Development Bank. Apologies from Dr. Daouda for not being able to come here. This was a last-minute replacement. And if you also allow me just very briefly about the Islamic Development Bank, we're a multilateral development bank that is 100% South-South. All of our 57 member countries are our shareholders. We don't have shareholders from the global north. And almost 50% of our member countries are considered fragile or conflict affected. So we deal with a very wide range of development needs, from least developed countries to middle income member countries. And we've also, as of the beginning of this year, all of our public financing has become aligned with the Paris Agreement. This has certain requirements now as per the joint principles with the other MDBs. As well, we've set a climate finance target of 35% of our sovereign financing, and that we hope to strike a balance between adaptation and mitigation finance on that. And finally, we also have now a just transition framework, which we are hoping to operationalize, and where we already started working with the ILO on this idea of socio-economic impact assessment of the green transition in specific regions. We started with the MENA region and the Central Asia region, and trying to understand this green transition with its different scenarios, how it affects the job market and the skills needed to cope with that green transition at the scale that is needed. And so since I'm more from the climate side, and by the way, our energy team and Dr. Hossein Mogabel send their regards as well, I would just share some insights from some of the financing that we've done. Most of our financing in renewables is utility scale, but we do have lines of financing that are delivered through financial intermediaries that go into small-scale renewables. One very high-level insight is the importance of subsidy reform. And, no matter how we spin it, unless you put a very large amount of grants, because governments want to, keep electricity affordable, the price of electricity or the price of diesel sometimes is quite low, therefore making it difficult for small-scale renewable technologies to compete. And that's a real issue, especially given that we feel that the real sustainable model of small-scale renewables must involve the private sector. So it's a tough act to balance. Really, governments are in a in a tough situation there to balance affordability with competitiveness of the small-scale renewables technologies. Also, when we look at small scale, we found that there could be completely different business and financial models depending on the context. Are you on grid or off grid? Are you rural or industrial facility? They're completely, sometimes different, even financial models. Obviously, you know, if you go rural, there's a large need for grant financing and concessional financing. But also you find that there's a very big need for after-sales services because these areas are usually not close to where the service providers are, and if anything goes wrong with the system, then the reliability drops and you don't find maintenance right away. So these are real issues that we face on the ground. And also in rural areas, we've noticed that sometimes we need to pay attention to the social dynamic that develops. So the trained, farmer or villager who can operate the solar pumping system has leverage in the society and becomes, a center of power in a way. And then sometimes the people will, respond to that in a negative way, and therefore to the whole system in a negative way. So these are some of the observations we saw. On the urban side and commercial and industrial, the equation is completely different. There's a lot of emerging players in that space. And I think one of the main things that we've been noticing is this importance of the so-called IPP model, the independent power producer model, where the solar developer comes into a commercial or industrial facility, at its own cost builds the small-scale renewable system and basically sells the electricity to the facility at a discount compared to the grid rate. Of course, this is very, very successful, but it's not feasible under a certain scale. It needs a bit of a larger scale or aggregation in an industrial zone or in a commercial zone, and that we're finding that aggregation key to the success. In addition, these types of IPPs, they require long-term loans, long loan tenors, like maybe 7, 8, even 13 years to make it financially viable for the solar developer. And that's something that we really faced working with the banking sector to try and extend the tenor of the loans to match these long-term engagements of the IPP model. And I think maybe I stop here, but basically, it's also the ecosystem. The ecosystem is quite important to try and maximize as much as possible the local component that goes into these small-scale systems instead of relying on imports. That's also, we're finding that very important, even if it's just the mounting structure and other basic electrical components. That's it. Thank you.
That's very helpful, thank you. My colleague, Dr. Farhad, in the report, is just finishing a book on Islamic finance, and I think the principles of Islamic finance have a lot to teach the rest of the world about how to finance. So hopefully maybe at a future event we can hear more about that. Can I just say that Dr. Mastrogianni has been called away to a ministerial meeting, so he asked me to give you his apologies. But if we can go maybe one more round of questions before we finish. So if I can just come back to Dr. Sadawi again. Given what we've heard about small versus medium versus large scale renewable energy investments, what do you see as most important from your experience with the Regen project? What do you see as most important in de-risking investments in small scale particularly?
Yeah, thank you. Just to highlight that ISDB also did contribute with us in Regen, but in the component of the capacity building. I would say let's think on de-risking solutions and strategies, I would say. But this we need to link it to financial instruments appropriate and context, really on a context where we work, because they need to be customized. And this need to go hand in hand with the capacity building, or let's say technical assistance. And this, I think that the three elements I want to focus on them. And this cannot be without partnerships. Now, in terms of de-risking specifically, I think we did mention, and this is the purpose of all the other exercise, and this is good that you did mention also at the starting point the NDCs, because when we did the NDCs, and I'm coming to a question, we did the NDCs in last September in our region, based on all the regional review of the NDCs that the UN system hosted. And basically, we try to help member states in order to prepare for bankable NDCs. And one of the critical elements is obviously looking financing small-scale solutions in integrated approach. But when the issue, and based on our experience, not only for region, but also when we link it also de-risking and looking to financial instruments to de-risk also energy efficiency project when they are also small-scale. You face slightly similar problems because of that. So technically speaking, what we learned, the number one is that we need to start with building the capacity of government institutions first, because they think that the outset of everything, that the principle of de-risking in small scale, it's not there yet. I'm not generalizing, but this is an issue, at least in the region where we operated. This is number one. And building the capacity is not only focusing on government institutions. You have the private sector, and you have also the national financial institutions. So this is where usually we, always from our region, we see from other adaptation side. But the thing that even our national financial institution, in order to create financial products, they are not able to support the communities and to unlock finance for small project, because they still not speak the same language as the communities in terms of finance, in terms of small scale renewable technologies, and they cannot obviously understand what the mechanism to put in there in order to provide diversity product that fits for purpose. Amar did mention the social aspect, and I commend ISZB for considering very much this aspect, and they do have a division which looks social, economic, and environmental, but also infrastructure, everything interlinked. The social aspect, specifically in terms of financial, I did mention financial instrument, and they need to fit to purpose. It's the engendering that. If you don't have the social aspect within, you have solutions that consider that, then you didn't solve the problem. And this is what we faced when implementing this project. The other aspect also I did mention beside that in addition to the financial instruments and so on, the private sector, you have the competition. Since small-scale renewable technologies touches different sectors, you are touching the agriculture, agrotourism, entrepreneurship activities that you have in general in the rural communities in most of the cases. And sometimes even it's large farms, but they may be in a desert, in very far situated places where it's very costly for government institutions to really ensure it's very costly to have them on the grid and to support them. So technically speaking, what I want to indicate that the competition, you find it when we find it in the NDCs, we try to engage different sectors. We find that they don't even speak the same language, and this is the problem. So you cannot obviously upscale and expand investment in small-scale renewable technologies if there is a competition in addressing to donors in order to have that. Definitively, the quality and the quantity of funding need to improve and need to change in a way or another. And specifically on that, grant is important, and specifically also if we need to present an integrated approach. There is the other element that I wanted to add beside that when I spoke about partnerships also need to be an approach from government institutions when presenting projects. It's what we call multi-donor approach. You have Regent, for example, what we did, we implemented, and then we look at two different donors. You can, in same project, have 1, 2, and 3, and let them compete, or let them complement each other, I would say. And the last point, I think, it's not just about the financial instrument, this is what we learned. At the policy level, you understand that you have policy instruments which are in terms of subsidies. So subsidies, or let's say incentives that you can provide in different sectors that helps to make a small scale bankable. And that's why we found that community, when they presented the project, they were not bankable because the regulations in place is not helping them. And regulation not just from the energy side, but also on the water side or the agriculture side. So it's a combination of different. So policymakers have a key role to play. And sometimes it's just economic instrument that you do. And you contribute at 50% to solving the problem. And this is what I want to say at this stage. Thank you.
If I can ask you and Dr. Sobi together, one of the interesting areas is around, I think, microfinance. Particularly with, it's not so much a renewable technology, but if you think about the desire, for example, to electrify tuk-tuks, and you can see tuk-tuk drivers driving around with a bottle not much bigger than mine, which I left over there, with petrol in it, and because they can't afford to fill the tank. If they can't afford to fill the tank, how can they afford to buy an electric tuk-tuk or rent or hire or convert a tuk-tuk? And how do you innovate to get finance into that kind of sector or into an alternative kind of cooking technology? Innovate financially, rather than technically, to get down to that level. One solution with tuk-tuks is that they often use Uber, for example. So maybe there's a payment mechanism through an app. So that maybe that's one way you can get to people. But tell me more about, you've looked at this. What can we do with aggregation or microfinance to get finance to where it's needed to drive change? I don't know which of you might be able to answer that question, or maybe you can answer it between you.
Again, I'm more from the climate side, but maybe I can give it a shot. I think at the moment, yes, we're seeing an unprecedented and continuous, actually, drop in renewable technology prices. Yes, unbelievable. To the extent that it's almost very difficult now to prove additionality if you're trying to issue carbon credits from a renewable energy project in most places in the world. You can't prove that you need the additional revenue from carbon credits, and therefore your project is not eligible for issuance because the renewable energy costs have come down so much, mainly because of the momentum in Asia from China and India and the big markets there. That being said, still in most of the world, at the moment, it looks like there's a significant amount of government support, grant support to these programs that's needed at the moment. Yes, of course, the use of technology and use of applications like Uber and similar to optimize the routes of these tuk-tuks and small electric vehicles to minimize their energy consumption. Of course, it's possible, but still, like you said, the affordability is so low in these contexts that some external injection has to be done without, let's say, financial return or viability at the moment. Of course, if you're doing pure bottom line financial analysis, it doesn't make sense. But if you're looking at the overall benefit of that type of injection into those transformations on the electric grid, on the air quality, which is really, if you factor that in somehow financially into the equation and factor in the premature deaths and the long waiting lists at respiratory doctors' clinics for children in many of the cities of our member countries. If you factor all of that in, then maybe you can see how it could be viable to pump those that level of support from governments and grant sources at the moment. I think that's my reflection, but maybe Dr. Radi or Dr. Maged can also add.
Well, the solution is simple. How how come it is simple? Simply have what we call Sustainable Energy Fund or Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund established to focus on serving these marginalized communities. And believe me, the rewards are tangible there. You can touch the gains of moving into such renewable energy and energy efficiency funds. And there are several examples in the MENA region. For example, in Jordan, Jarif, Jordan Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Fund. In Tunisia, Energy Transition Fund. In Morocco, the SIE, as I remember, and so on. Green Economy Finance Facility in Egypt, funded by EBRD. The others, Environmental Compliance Office Initiative in Egypt. And so there are plenty of funds that can be operated at national level, at sectorial level also, that would help addressing the issue that you have highlighted, that the credit worthiness of those who would benefit from the system. In fact, based on real cases, based on, for example, if you go into the Brosol program in Tunisia, you will find that the benefit for the country because of resorting to solar water heaters and solar PV, rooftop PV in different sectors are much higher than what was invested. And these investments come from different sources. First, of course, is international collaboration, as Radi highlighted. Different donors, IFIs, development partners, as we call them. But the other sources, taxation of polluting equipments that are imported. And we have seen this in many countries. And these have been applied in some areas of the region. On the other side, you can lower the tax on renewables. And this happened in Egypt, for example, and others. So lowering the tax from one side on renewables, hiring the tax, making it higher, increasing the tax on on polluting technologies would make you some gains that you can use in these sustainable funds. And also make them also run in a business model that, in fact, similar to what we call not-for-profit organizations, that they use the benefits. For example, in Jordan, the fund in Jordan, it was a revolving fund. So it is used to other users. So they are always paying back and giving again, and so on. So there are plenty of concepts. But the solution is you need, as Dr. Amra highlighted, you need to go into strong intervention from the government side, from the supporter development partner side, but also you need to plan well for this. And my slogan here, if we fail to plan, we plan to fail. If we are not able to do this in a right way that fits the purpose. And we have seen that many good wells were there in several funds in some countries, but they have never been tapped. And I will not say the names of the countries that have allocated resources, but people didn't touch them, simply because of the bureaucratic process to apply for this, or because of the absence of qualified list of suppliers for the technology, or because of lack of quality control on the installation and maintenance side. So if any country is not able to design collectively the entire system around this fund, then the success rate will not be as expected. And if you link this to the role of national banks, and the national banks have better access to citizens than the multilateral development banks or the bilateral finance from KfW, EIB, etc. When you act with them, then you can have, I would say, the multiplier impact, that leverage. And I have one example. I was on the advisory board of the Egypt PV project funded by the Global Environmental Facility through UNDP. And it was only $2 million to have some pilots, among them, for example, the new Egyptian Museum, the most important railway station in Cairo, etc. Some eye-taking areas that people can see, oh, this is leading by example. And you can imagine that these 2 million leveraged 20 million. And they started a momentum for more than 50 companies working on decentralized solutions in Egypt for photovoltaic. And they are working, and now another cycle is from this project is focusing on the industrial sector. Out of this project, we have now an initiative for one of the most important Egyptian cities, which is Sharm el-Sheikh. It is called the Green Charm, where all the resorts there, all the hotels are using decentralized solutions. So you can imagine that you are creating, by putting this small seed finance, you are leveraging a lot of money in different sectors. So I hope I have answered your question.
I think we've had a lot of answers, and I think we've got some more questions. So before we wrap up, because we're close to time now, I just wondered if either anybody from the floor had any projects or projects they wanted to highlight, or questions they wanted to ask, or suggestions for next steps, or if there's anybody on the panel who has any further points they would like to make.
I want to close for the microfinance institutions, financial institutions, just to indicate that that's why technical assistance is important, and also building their capacity is important. So far, the return on investment is very high, and that's why customized solutions is needed, provided that microfinance solutions, microfinance need to be supported by policy instruments and regulation. And that's why Amr, I think he did mention carbon credit, so you have the economic instruments. So it's a combination of all in order to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Does anybody have any closing remarks? Farman, do you want to say anything in terms of closing things off? In that case, let's leave it there. That's a very, very interesting session. I think we've got a lot, as I say, a lot of some answers to some questions, but some more questions to take forward for future study. Thank you very much all for your time, and thank you audience. Thank you.